Looking back, Cleopatra is known for one thing above all: her stunning beauty. But no matter how attractive she might have been, to reduce history's last female pharaoh and Julius Caesar's lover to looks alone would not do her justice. Today, we would like to turn the wheel of time back more than 2,000 years together with you and deal with one of the greatest mysteries of antiquity. Was Cleopatra really the irresistible seductress she is still known to be today? What do we know about her mysterious death? And why would the discovery of her grave shake all of history? Let's get to the bottom of these exciting questions together. But before we start, be sure to like and subscribe to continue delving into the most exciting history puzzles of all time. One last trump. It is August 10th, 30 BC, when Cleopatra takes a bath and enjoys a delicious meal worthy of a powerful queen. However, the last pharaoh was already confronted with the shards of her life at this point. The golden days of rule, in which Cleopatra vehemently tried to assert her empire against the Roman world power, were long gone. Alexandria had been taken by the Romans. Cleopatra's lover Mark Antony had committed suicide, and she herself found herself imprisoned in a palace. Since the queen was soon to be paraded in Rome as spoils of war, there was only one way out for her. She had to die. Already after the death of Antonius, the broken woman had tried to die of starvation. However, Octavian, the death-willing, found out and stopped her from her plans by threatening to harm her children otherwise. At Cleopatra's urgent request, Octavian then appeared for a final visit to the royal palace. However, the ancient writers Plutarch and Cassius draw completely different pictures of this conversation. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra made a pathetic picture. Only in her slip and with her hair tousled, she seemed to be despair personified. When an allegedly incomplete list of Cleopatra's treasures were presented, she is said to have completely lost her composure, not because she was actually attached to these material goods, but to pretend to Octavian that her will to live was unbroken. With success, Octavian took the bait so that the guarding of the prisoners was relaxed, so nothing stood in the way of the last pharaoh's final coup. Mysterious death. This contrasts with the report by Cassius. According to this, Cleopatra tried to wrap Octavian around her finger with her irresistible arts of seduction, just like Caesar and Antonius once did, and to pull him to her side. However, the virtuous Roman emperor managed to withstand the advances of beauty. Be that as it may, a peasant is said to have finally appeared at the palace and brought a basket full of figs. When the guards were satisfied that the basket contained nothing but fruit, Cleopatra was allowed to receive it. After sending another urgent letter to Octavian, the prisoner locked herself with her trusted servants, Iris and Charmion, after which all three committed suicide. To this day, however, people are puzzled about how Cleopatra managed to put her suicide into practice. The most common theory is that the basket of figs contained a poisonous cobra, which the queen allowed herself to be bitten at will. This assumption also coincides with the report that the snake charmer tried in vain to suck the poison out of the body. However, ancient historians took great care to emphasize the exact manner of Cleopatra's death was unclear. Open questions. Although two tiny stitches were allegedly found on Cleopatra's arm, and Augustus presented a picture during his triumphal procession in Rome that showed the ruler with two snakes, the cobra theory is anything but undisputed to this day. Probably the greatest mystery lies in the fact that no such reptile could be found in Cleopatra's apartments. In addition, it must have been quite complicated to let a snake bite 3 people at the same time. In addition, the poison bite could have been associated with extreme pain, and under certain circumstances would have led to death days later. It is therefore more likely that Cleopatra died from poison, but deliberately ingested or injected it. For example, this could have happened with the help of a poisoned hair clip, needle, or ointment. The cobra version was then deliberately circulated to attest the queen a somewhat more dignified death. After all, the snakes were considered sacred animals at the time. In fact, it cannot be ruled out that Cleopatra did not commit suicide at all, but was murdered at Octavian's behest. The image of a broken, publicly humiliated woman would have aroused the sincere sympathy of the viewers, rather than strengthening the emperor's reputation. The Tomb Mystery. Ultimately, Cleopatra, who was 39 at the time of her death, was buried with her two maids in her mausoleum next to Antonius. The problem? We have no idea where the queen's tomb really is, but we do have some exciting clues. In this regard, the excitement in the ranks of experts was particularly great in 2009. A year earlier, archaeologists had come across the head of a statue of Cleopatra, 22 Cleopatra coins, and a mask of Mark Antony in the temple of Taposiris Magna. As a result, the couple's bodies were in fact secretly hidden in the temple, lest they fall into the hands of the victorious Romans. According to the researchers, Cleopatra and Antony would rest in a tomb more than 20 meters below the temple. It is very likely that the pharaoh was also mummified before her burial, but since Antonius was neither Egyptian nor a ruler, this burial ritual may not have been used on him. But although experts have been examining the temple area for several years, there is still no trace of Cleopatra and her lover, a circumstance that could change very soon as a result of a breathtaking discovery. A new lead. Archaeologist Catherine Martinez has spent the last 20 years of her professional life locating Cleopatra's tomb. Although the search has yet to yield any groundbreaking results, Martinez now believes he is a step closer to unraveling this historical mystery. Accordingly, the researcher recently came across a previously unknown tunnel system and a religious site that contained several sanctuaries near the Taposiris Magna temple. Accordingly, the archaeologists discovered coins in the underground chambers that show the image of Alexander the Great and coins on which we recognize Cleopatra. For the researcher, this find is a clear indication that the discovered tunnels must lead to the tomb of the missing queen. Another indication that speaks for this thesis, according to Martinez, is the fact that the temple was once dedicated to the deities of Isis and Osiris. In the belief of the population at the time, Cleopatra and Marcus Antonius were considered to be the reincarnations of just that pair of gods. A look at the dimensions shows that the subterranean passage system can confidently be described as a technical masterpiece. Located around 13 meters below the surface, the tunnel is 2 meters high, while at the same time extending 1.3 kilometers in length. Should Martinez be right in her assumption, and the corridor actually lead to Cleopatra's tomb, its discovery would be one of the greatest archaeological sensations in history. However, the future will have to show to what extent the assumptions of the expert correspond to reality. Historical upheaval. As already mentioned, the discovery of the grave could mean nothing less than a significant upheaval in historiography to date. But why is this actually the case? Well, that would be primarily because the discovery of the tomb would also come with the revelation of an entirely new source of information. For context, our current knowledge of the pharaoh is mainly based on ancient Greek and Roman sources that were only made after Cleopatra's death. We must not forget that the relevant writers were by nature critical of the Egyptian queen. In this regard, Kathleen Martinez suggests that our Cleopatra image has been massively consumed as a result of propaganda and persistent prejudice against women. The extent to which the idea of a beautiful seductress, power-hungry politicians, unscrupulous schemers, and godlike rulers actually correspond to reality could be tested by revealing a new ancient Egyptian point of view. The few Egyptian finds to date, such as honorary reliefs on the temple she built, suggest that Cleopatra was viewed by her subjects in a completely different light. And who knows, if her body was actually mummified, the experts might be able to reconstruct the real cause of the queen's death. Thanks to the modern tools of our day, many a technology-based mummy investigation has helped uncover previously unknown facts about the deceased. In this regard, however, it remains to be seen whether the archaeologists are really the first to track down the tomb after all this time. If the site has been trespassed and looted by tomb robbers in the past, we can only hope that the window on one of the most exciting figures in antiquity has not already been completely closed. The unfinished masterpiece. Outside of the lure of finding Cleopatra's tomb, several other amazing discoveries have been made in Egypt in recent years. The true ambition of this building project becomes clear to us when we take a look at the length of the sides of the Baka Pyramid. It is 200 meters. Since the mighty Cheops Pyramid also had an original base length of 230 meters, It is assumed that its unfinished counterpart would have reached comparable heights if it had been completed. In general, however, almost nothing is known about the background of the Baca Pyramid. It seems as if the project was stopped immediately after the foundation was worked out. The substructure of the tomb houses a T-shaped shaft. If you want to reach it, you have to climb a 100-meter-long steep stairway. However, this stepped path is interrupted halfway by a large ledge. Why this is so is still unknown. A found object indicates that so-called blocking stones were once intended to be placed there. The actual burial shaft is 27 meters long, 11.7 meters wide, and more than 20 meters deep. Although the inner walls of this passage were painstakingly polished, the researchers could not find a ceiling or wall paneling here. All that was completed was the covering of the floor. This is presented in the form of huge blocks of granite, the tops of which have also been polished. In detail, these massive components are 4.5 meters long and weigh around 9 tons. We have a natural helper to thank for the fact that we know today that the planned height of the burial chamber was a good 3 meters. After heavy rains, the falling masses of water were backed up to the same height mark, since the walls have been smoothed and polished by then. The overlying water in turn seeped directly into the unhewn subsoil. In addition to the question about the sudden halt to construction, another question has remained unanswered to this day. Who was the Baca Pyramid supposed to be built in honor of? What mighty ruler was never laid to rest here? A look at the mysterious sarcophagus may help to get closer to the answer to this central question. Mysterious sarcophagus. Near the west end of the burial chamber, the experts came across a mysterious coffin. In detail, this sarcophagus had an oval shape and was incorporated directly into the floor. However, with a length of 3.15 meters and a width of 2.2 meters, the object was much too bulky to fit through the access route. As a result, it is reasonable to conclude that the sarcophagus was lowered down the shaft while the foundation was being laid. Immediately next to this huge coffin, its also oval-shaped lid could be found, which finished perfectly with the sarcophagus. According to Alessandro Barsanti, the tomb even contained a few artifacts that indicated burial. The inexplicable thing is that not only are there no trace of the objects in question these days, in fact, they should never have been examined in detail. However, the Italian researcher stated that he had come across a small plate bearing the name of Rajadev. In fact, there are very few reliable sources about the life of this pharaoh. What is certain is that Rajadev was in power between the years 2580 and 2570 BC and was the son of Pharaoh Cheops. His father's mighty tomb was also completed during Rajadev's reign. Why the tablet that was discovered bore the name of this pharaoh of all things is uncertain. Rajadev actually built his own pyramid in Abu Rosh. In truth, the scientific minds are still arguing about who should really be buried there. But what do the experts have to say about this? Do you think the newly discovered tunnel actually leads to Cleopatra's tomb? And should we take a closer look at the life of the famous pharaoh in a future video? As always, let us know your thoughts, suggestions, and feedback on today's post in the comments below. Show us with a thumbs up and a subscription that you enjoyed our detour into the mysterious world of antiquity. And with that, thanks for watching, have a good one, and see you next time.